Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring psychedelic music, looking at a band who puts that right in the title of their band name. We're looking at Psychedelic Porn Crumpets. We're going to be checking out a track called Found God in a Tomato off of their debut 2016 album High Visceral, Part 1. We've checked out this group a couple of times in the past. I think primarily on live stream, though. Maybe we've done one full reaction to them. Anyways, I'm kind of excited, kind of wary. They've been a band that's been kind of 50-50 for me in the past. Really enjoy what they're doing, but they really like to drag things out if I'm remembering properly. So let's dive into this. Check out the song Found God in a Tomato. I like that little bluesy run there. Good start to this. Yeah, like a grungy country track. This is kind of cool. What I really like is the drummer being a bit on the minimal side and yet still having drive, still having momentum to it. The drummer's building though. It's not an empty drum part, and it isn't an uninteresting drum part despite being on the more minimal side. It's a tough balance to have. No, that is 4. Very interesting 4, but I kind of thought it was 5 for a second. Bit of a different feel here too, very driven. Gotta have the reverb on the vocals. Kind of spacious too. Had that extension too. The final beat of the riff landed on 1 of the following bar, and the reset came on 2. So I thought it was 5 for a second. Another one. Kind of played around with time in neat ways. That cymbal stuff there last time too? I missed that. I love this because as momentous as this is, and there's tension everywhere that really pushes this forward, it's this floating, sort of less like positive floating, maybe more abyssal floating, maybe even purgatory. Yeah. Nice grit on the vocals there too. This is the more stereotypical psychedelic part where you're supposed to chill and feel it, man. See where it takes you. I love how the drums and bass and lower guitar have this heavy physicality to them, and then you have the guitar and the vocals way up top in the mix, sort of floating. Longer held out notes, those bends. Fun little syncopation with those background vocals. Fun bit of movement right there. Yeah. As to be expected with psychedelic, I think a lot of it comes down to the vibes, man. And this song's bridge kind of turns into that. As much as I'm not usually a fan of jammy styles of writing, I kind of wish something had happened there, even if it was completely improvised guitar work that didn't quite necessarily pull us through the moment, but at least gave me something melodic to hang on to there. But honestly, it wasn't as long as it seemed. I think we only had 3 repetitions through it, and that final one actually had a small bit of variation on it as well. So yeah, could have been a lot worse, though. I think personally I would have liked it a little better. I'm a fan of melody, man. I like atmosphere. Don't get me wrong. You look back at my album of the year list from this year, and it's vibes based. A lot of it is, but it's always got a melody against that vibe. And here it's just the atmosphere, just the vibe in this middle part. We do eventually get a guitar solo, which I liked, and I'll touch on that in a second. But I think I just wanted to get this out of the way. It's really my only criticism, and it's not really with this track in particular. It's sort of just psychedelic in general. Like I had mentioned, that part of the track where it was starting to lose me was sort of you just gotta lay back and relax, man, enjoy it. Like, yeah, I get it, man. I know why it's there. It's just, especially in this setting where I'm trying to analyze the music and figure out what it's doing and saying, it's just kind of a moment that I don't have a lot to latch onto. And my brain's like, all right, what's around the next corner? What's around the next corner? All right, this 4 bars is up. Are they going to repeat it? They're repeating it again. I got nothing to do here. And yeah, for me, it seems like it just stretches on. But in a more casual environment, lights out, just kind of chilling in the corner. Maybe got a nice beanbag going on. You don't have a camera and lights in your face. Yeah, dude, that section probably hits really well. And it is a nice lull against the rest of the track. And that's because so much of this song is kind of deceptively driven. There's a lot of momentum to this song, despite the fact that so much of it is just kind of light, bit of etherealness, especially anytime you have a melody line in here. The vocals are drenched in reverb. The guitar work is typically higher pitched, but not sharp. There's a levity to it that almost feels like the higher pitch element is more of a levity. It doesn't have the weight of a low end holding it down. It's lifting off not because it has a rocket or a jetpack or something, but simply because it is lighter than air. It just gets to float throughout the track. And that was something I mentioned throughout this song too, is that if we look at the textures of this song, so much of it is something just drifting and floating above this weightier sound. You listen to the bass, you listen to the rhythm guitar, you listen to the drums. They all have impact, they have presence. None of them really have too much reverb, if they have any at all. They're more physical, they're present, and they're weighty. They really land on their downbeats. The melodies, though, whether it is a guitar or the vocals, or even the background vocals in the chorus, the ones that come in between the main vocal line, they're just so light. There's barely anything to them. They're like a vapor inside of a physical realm. And it's very cool to see this distinct separation between them. And I think one of the key sections we can kind of hear this in is the verse. You got the big chord that takes up a quarter of it, and then the other 3/4 of this pattern is kind of emptiness. You got the vocals, you got a little bit of rhythm guitar, drums and bass over here. They're creating this physical element, this foundation, the floor to the song. Then your vocals are just soaring above, and between all of that's just bass. Then you get like the 3 hits again, the big part of the riff, and it fills all this space, and then you're just floating again. And it's so palpable, the difference between the largeness and size of the instrumentation and the lightness of the lead vocals here. And this is how a lot of the song ends up feeling, though without as much of the spaciousness between the 2 elements. But it does create a track that feels like not necessarily at ends with each other. The 2 opposing ideas benefit each other. They feel as much of an extreme as they are because of the immediate contrast. Feeling the impact of the snare or the bass kick feels more impactful, feels more physical because the vocals are as ethereal and light and lacking a specific place as the rest of the instruments. And the same is true vice versa too, where the vocals or the guitars feel like they're soaring so high in the mix, pitch wise, but also placement. They just sound way up there because you have so much of this physicalness present here through the other instruments. And they really allow the other side of the song to flourish in a way by sheer contrast. I don't know how we got on this time. It was one of the topics I planned on talking about, but we were actually supposed to be talking about momentum here. Let's get back to that. The momentum of this track, it is always forward going. Oh yeah, because I had mentioned that parts of it can feel ethereal, and they do, but also if you listen to the drums, if you listen to the heartbeat of this track, much of this foundational element here at the beginning, there's a drive to it. There's an intensity to it. As much as this song wants me to feel like I'm just kind of floating in an ocean of, I don't know, space. Does that make sense? Like, I get the vibes of waves, but I don't get the atmosphere of water. I get more of the atmosphere of outer space. But it's still this idea of like floating on currents, where you kind of have this subtle wave going on. It's not just static floating in space, you know? It's an interesting mix of like water and space movement, but still this idea of being small within a vast atmosphere, a vast environment. But there's always momentum. It's always going somewhere. I am floating, but I have a destination, and I am floating there in a consistent way. And a lot of this, I think, comes down to the bass and the drums just really having this momentum to them. And I even mentioned at the beginning of the reaction that the drumming is minimal. There's not a lot going on. A little bit of cymbal here and there. The snare and the bass kick are used quite sparingly, once or twice per every bar or two. I guess like every 2 to 4 bars, I'd say. Like whatever the phrase is, we only hear the snare and bass kick once or twice. It's sparsely used in order to give the perception of time. This doesn't feel loose and timeless. There is a rigid pattern that we can follow along. There's not too much space between hits, but it's also not interested too much in making sound or making noise, just enough to create the form of time without really leaning into it too much. But the drummer does give us some accentuating hits every now and then, a little bit of ornamental ideas alongside the more minimal, bare bones structure to it. And between the two of these, we just barely understand what the main pulse of the song is, but it also gives us direction. We can feel an intensity to this, despite it not really being an intense sound at all. This is very much a lean back and chill out track through and through, but it is not really too interested in being in the here and the now. Because of the frequency of notes, because of the accented notes, especially as we get into the first verse, like ignoring the first 2 minutes of the track, the intro there. Once we come into the first verse riff, we get the vocals coming in. There is certainly a momentum to it all. The tempo picks up just enough to feel it, not enough to really make the song feel like it's drastically changed pace. And again, despite the fact that guitar chords just kind of strum and let them ring out, very much a laid back, despite the vocals and the lead guitars playing these longer held out notes, the bass and the drums are pushing this song forward. They're playing more notes than any other instrument around them. Still not a lot. It doesn't want to create intensity. It doesn't want to beat you over the head with so many hits per bar. It still needs to be light and chill. But we need to get somewhere. This is like the weird metaphor. Where does my brain think sometimes? Follow me with this. You're going out on like a drive, right? You're not hitting the highway. You're not doing 70, 89, 90 miles per hour. We don't have any 90 mile per hour highways around here at least. But if there were some, you're not hitting that. You're not, going fast on these these roads, but you're not doing like the 20-mile-per-hour back roads either. This song is like a solid 40 to 45 miles per hour. Right there in the middle of the lane. Not slow that it feels like you're crawling, but you're not being a speed demon going through traffic either. You're getting somewhere at a decent pace while still enjoying your environment. And that's what this song feels like to me. No matter what, the tempo rises a little bit, the tempo diminishes a little bit, layers come down, layers add up. It always feels like we're just getting somewhere. Just heading out. We know where we're going. We're not taking our time, but we're not speeding either. And I find that to be really interesting given how laid back and relaxed, which should equal slower pace. It should equal, lean back, just chill, whatever happens, happens. And there's a bit more control to this track. We are trying to determine how we get somewhere. We're not letting the song, the song's not letting nope, that metaphor's falling apart. I hope you get it though. I'm running out of metaphors on this one. Anyways, I find that to be really interesting because at no point do I find contention between this. That most of the instruments feel like they want me to just slow down, to get out of the car and smell the roses, take in the environment. No part of the song makes me feel like that's what we're doing expressly. But most of this track makes me feel like I just need to lean back, close my eyes, and let the world take me where it's going to take me. And I find that to be really cool. I do have these two separate ideas here. Slow down, but get somewhere on time. And that seems to be kind of contentious in one manner, but also cooperatively aimed in another. I wish I had a better phrase for this. I'm sure there is one out there that would be pretty cool, but I mean, that's what I get from this track. It is both laid back and determined to be somewhere on time at the same time, and that's wild. Now, I had mentioned solos in here, and I really dig these, man, especially when you pair and compare them to the lead vocals. We have two slightly different melodic writing styles here. Both kind of focus along holding out notes a bit longer than the other instruments, which have a bit more pace to them. But they're also really focused on bends in a way the rest of the instruments aren't. Part of this, I think, just stems from it being very blues coded. I don't know if I could pinpoint any specific element that I would say, yeah, this is ripped from the blues, but it's definitely leans in that direction. Some of the components of the chordal progression, some of the components of the melodic progression, combined, these little bits and pieces. It's like when you taste a food and you're like, oh yeah, there's garlic in here. It doesn't overpower it, and if you really weren't looking for it, you might not have tasted it specifically, but because you were kind of curious, I wanted to make this, what kind of flavors can I taste in it? And you're like, oh yeah, there's definitely garlic in here. And that's me with the blues. I wouldn't say that any part of this is distinctly bluesy, but when I'm listening to specific elements, I do hear hints of blues throughout. And I really enjoy that because blues rock, that's right up my alley, man. That is some emotive guitar playing. And you can hear influences of that in here. And I think one of the clearest ones are the bends. Both with the vocals, where the vocalist might start on one note. I'm just going to pick a random word here. And it'd be like, if it was man. I don't know, psychedelic and man just works. It's like, man, just got this nice slide into the next pitch rather than just man. So that's what I hear from the vocals a lot. They're very slippery, very slidey, but the guitar as well is full of these bends in the notes. The guitar does play a little faster than the vocalist, I hear. And it does seem that they have more momentum to their solos. Their melody writing tends to be a little bit more directioned, ready to get to that next note. Not really wanting to hang on to this one too long, but it doesn't have a problem. It's kind of stretching things out for a little bit before it gets back on their original tempo. The vocalist is just really chill. And I think this is one of the strongest components to this track as far as that feeling of being laid back, of just being here in the moment, man. I'm not in any rush to get anywhere. But I think the other component to that too isn't just the melody writing of the two of these, although I love how they sort of balance each other out, one having more momentum and one having less. The song as a whole isn't too interested in moving at all, despite the rhythm section pushing us forward, despite the solos and the melody writing always going to the next keynote or trying to wrap up this phrase or something. There really isn't much there that feels cyclical or locked in a state. But the chord progression is, I think there are 3 or 4 different chord progressions on this track that they use for different sections, the bridge, the chorus, the verse. And I think the intro had its own progression as well. And I don't remember what the outro was. But all of them have the same goal in mind. This entire song feels similar throughout. It all has that vague, psychedelic, drug-fueled, mind-altering kind of feeling to it. It all feels like it came straight out of the 60s. And that's really interesting to me because at no point in the song do I think that I don't remember ever becoming bored with the chords. I did find the bridge to be repetitive, but if there was a melody there, I would not have thought of it at all. I don't think the general atmosphere of this song needs to develop too much. I think that the intensity of the layers, the intensity of the melodies, and the rhythmic devices in here are all doing enough to keep the song interesting from moment to moment, that the atmospheric energy or emotional component doesn't really need to develop too much. But it does retain a singular feeling throughout the song that does make it feel like it is here. Even though here continues to move in a progression, it's still always here. It is this psychedelic feeling. And so that does help it feel a bit more laid back and aware of its surroundings more than more than other elements of the track, which feel like they have a destination in mind and are ready to get there. And once again, we have this nice push and pull, something that feels in one way, but also feels in another. This one being a bit more less momentous versus more momentous, working simultaneously. And I guess this kind of pulls into the larger idea too of the instruments versus the melody, or the foundation versus the melody. So this song does a lot of balancing, and I think that's what keeps it fresh and interesting despite kind of being samey from moment to moment. And it never really allows the track to become too repetitive. And I think that is, at least for me, a high mark of psychedelic, because we've listened to some psychedelic jam stuff in the past. And that can feel really lost in the moment, and time just stretches out for me, where like a 6-minute song feels like an 18-minute track. Let me hit some lyrics on this one, then we'll wrap this one up. I'm glad there's a little bit of context to this one. The track doesn't make a lot of sense. There's certainly elements of altered perception in here, viewing time differently and viewing experience differently. We'll get into that in a moment, but most of it is about wanting to travel the world with fruits. Yeah, that's kind of bizarre. I couldn't piece these two together. However, on an interview, well, I guess it was an Ask Me Anything over on Reddit, Jack had mentioned that Jack's part of the band. He mentioned that one of his friends had a house that they used to go to, and they experimented with mushrooms for the first time. And he opened the fridge and found just a sole tomato there, and he was convinced he had found God. That this tomato was God. He said, "I remember carrying it around the whole night, telling people." So this song is about altering your perception of reality because you have found spirituality with a fruit. And that puts a lot of this track into perspective for me. Verse 1 says, I'm barely operating, yet a functional being. Always seem to be vacant, parading myself as an abductee. Then one morning I was transposed from a simple young man to a godly tomato that held all existence and told me that we should expand. This kind of sets things up, but I think you have to know that it was about finding a tomato and not becoming a tomato, because he says that he was transposed from a simple man to a godly tomato, and this really threw me for a loop. I couldn't figure out what that was supposed to be about at all. Verse 3 talks about thoughts, leaving his head, being left behind on a pillow as he enters cloud 9, changing his own design and wondering how many other fruits he could connect to his head. Maybe taking a papaya, he could travel the world and the universe as two friends. Wild stuff. Now, this is more of the comical side, the set piece for the experiential change, which I think is where the chorus comes in. It says, the world will now revolve around me. And I know it could change my life because I'm different. He says, I'll wake up. It'll always be fine. It'll always be easy. And I'm grateful to that tomato. But the bridge says, I found it getting harder every time. I count backwards in my head and I'm coming back, but I'm not here all of my life. I'm coming back, but I'm not here. This, I think, is the trippy psychedelic core to the otherwise comical story going on here. Did I say store or story? I meant story. It's about finding this spiritual redefining elements of life and realizing things are going to be easy now, or at least thinking that you've realized life's going to be easy now. But then also comes the other side of this. If this tomato is God and really connecting me to this higher level of understanding, you also begin to perceive time. And time is wild, man. Like, legit. Even going back to the paradox of, did we create time or has it always been there, has been something really interesting to me. Time is incredibly complex despite being incredibly simple. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years. We understand this as early as 5-6 years old. We start learning about how to tell time on clocks and how to read calendars really early in age. Time itself is an easy concept, but time's wild, dude. It's so complex. What is time? And I think that's what this bridge is about, of always being here and always going, but never going. Always coming back here, but not being here. The idea of being present in oneself and understanding of one's environment, of being emotionally and spiritually available to what's around you, to actually be here in this second, but to be in the second, you also lose the second. To be present becomes the past. To focus on the future is to focus on not now. If you're not focusing on the now, how are you completing things now? But now is now then. And I think if I'm having these thoughts with a sober mind, what in the world do people on mushrooms think about, or weed or anything, when they start approaching the psychedelic components of time? And this turns an otherwise very lighthearted and almost comical track into something a bit more existential. It brings weight to it. I didn't feel this in the music. I felt like the music was fairly consistent with its emotional weight, with its atmospheric components, with its environmental storytelling. It's always the contrast of everything. But I do enjoy how the lyrics are engaging with this part, especially after talking about how easy he knew his life would become. And then this difficult concept pops up. That's a fun song. Fun story to tell. It just all around puts a smile on my face. These are my thoughts on Psychedelic Porn Crumpets, Found God in a Tomato. What do you think of this song? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Let me know. Add it into the comment section below along with anything else you'd like to add. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.